Welcome to Tommy Solo's Famous Friends. This is where I get to chat with people who I've connected with over the years in the world of arts and entertainment, and this is part 2 of my in-depth interview with seminal artist Bob Segarini. Where we left off, in part 1, Bob was just starting to tell us about how his band, All the Young Dudes, was starting to get notice in the States, and were written about in several American magazines, and this is the continuation. I hope that you like it. Bob's been there, done that, and has a lot to say about it.
And two things from those newspaper and magazine articles, which were reviews of the live show, which makes it even more ridiculously stupid of what CBS did to us, as a story for another time. One day, we were living in Montreal, and we came to Toronto to play 2 nights at Larry's Hideaway. So, of course, there's a blizzard. So there's 2 people in the club the first night. Well, they turned out to be 2 guys that had flown in from New York. One was Ian Hunter and Blood, Sweat, and Tears manager Fred Heller, and his partner, a lawyer named Nat Weiss, who was Brian Epstein's American partner in the Beatles. And so you always put on a good show, because you never know who's going to be in the audience. So Fred wanted to sign us, and we get an offer from CBS US, not Canada, and they gave us $250,000 US.
And that was huge back then.
Oh, it was the biggest advance a Canadian act ever got from an American label. But that's not important. We didn't know that. We just ran around and paid bills. Had a suitcase full of money. And ran around and paid everybody the money we owed them. That was a fun night. But then they gave us, we recorded, done a lot of work already while they were fine-tuning Morin Heights, the studio, and at Tempo, all the studios had fronted us downtime and everything so we could put the band together. And we did our best to pay everybody back. And the label sent us a first-time producer and his favorite engineer, and they destroyed everything that was great about the band, Now I can hear how good we were on the CBS Steve album, but when you hear the demos for those songs, it's like 2 separate things.
When I talked to Jamie Vernon last, he said that you were happy to remix some of the things you've done in the past, but you just want to throw that one out and re-record it.
Well, I'd like to remix the demos. Let me put it this way. We recorded a half a dozen tracks towards the second Dudes album, one of which, all of them ended up on the Gotta Have Pop album, on my first solo album.
Once again, due to not the greatest phone connection, I'm going to clarify that what Bob just said was that all of the songs from the Dudes project ended up on his first solo album, Gotta Have Pop. Now back to Bob.
Including Gotta Have Pop. And the Dudes version is so good. It just sparks. It's almost identical to the Segarini Band version. But there's something about it that elevates it. I don't know what it is. Can't put my finger on it.
Chemistry.
It was the energy and the fact that we were being in the Dudes was basically going to a comedy club. It was just so much fun. I spent most of my time in that band with tears in my eyes from laughing. It was a great experience. The weeks that we spent on the road with the Bee Gees, the greatest, if I could wish any young band the perfect tour to go on, it would be with the Bee Gees. They were so gracious and so wonderful. Big Dad was with us for the first week of the tour. That's when I met Andy, and there's great stories about him later on. He was 12 or 13 when I met him. They were so great to us. Barry especially. We got an encore in Montreal, and they let us take it. And we always had all the lights and all the PA. And after the Montreal show, Barry came backstage He walked into our dressing room, and I could tell he really enjoyed it. So man, he looks around, and he goes, "Where's your meal and your deli tray? Where's your beer?" And from that moment on, for the remainder of the tour, he made sure that we got in our dressing room, but the BGs got in theirs. Now, I've toured a lot with a lot of bands and a lot of artists, and no one has ever treated us the way that we were treated by the BGs. They were wonderful.
Isn't that awesome? You know, it reminds me of a few shows that I've been to. I went to see the Eagles and their Hell Freezes Over tour in Toronto, and it was a really good show. But what I was very disappointed in is that they sabotaged Sheryl Crow's mix. So she opened the show, and the mix was just really bad. And then all of a sudden the Eagles come on, and it's just wonderful.
Okay, let me tell you what happened. First of all, not the band. We got sabotaged twice in my experience on a road. Both times, oddly enough, were Maple Leaf Gardens. Oh no, and one in Quebec City. We're opening for Johnny Winter. But it wasn't John, and it wasn't Santana, both of whom I know or knew, and it wasn't Gino Vanelli, also someone I knew from Montreal. It was the crew. There are roadies out there who take on a great deal of importance if they're with a successful act, and it goes to their little heads. And they think they're protecting the artist that they work for, and which, oddly enough, is almost a testament to being a good enough artist to put fear in these guys that they have to, take away half the PA or lights or whatever. But in the instances that we suffered through it, it was never the band. Stop and think about it for a minute. Band's that big. You have no reason to. Anybody who's been in this business for 20 minutes will tell you that the whole show reflects on the main artist. So if you're headlining, you want everything that comes off that stage that night to be fantastic, whether it's you or the middle act or the opening act or whatever, because it's all your show. So wow, the Eagles show was fantastic. Nobody wants to hear, I don't know why they brought that stupid first band. So the reality of it is there are small-minded recording artists out there, especially these days, where you're known by your bitches and your hoes and the amount of Lamborghini coffins that you run. In defense to touring bands, you don't sabotage people because you don't know the next time you go through Albuquerque or Houston, you don't know who's going to be headlining. And God help you if it's the band that you screwed with 2 years ago. So most of that stuff is done by either frightened management or follows themselves road crews.
Well, I've done some stage crew work myself in recent years, and I'm not going to do it again because in my 60s I don't want to be looking all that stuff. But I've seen some negligence from the guys on the front of house and so on, where the band is on and the guy who's running front of house is nowhere to be found when things aren't working.
Well, some of that has to do with timing. There are so many times you're used to the fact that you're not going to get a sound check. So you're used to making sure that your first song of your set is your sound check. We always had great crews. I have to admit, in all the years that I played and toured, every crew that I ever associated with, these guys, they took a bullet for you, and they were good people. They ran up the bar bill, mind you, but so did we. I mean, there were times when our bar bill would be bigger than the amount of money we got paid. But we were doing it to have a good time. We weren't kidding ourselves that, if you're playing in Seabreeze, Ontario, and you're on your way to Sleeping Bag, Manitoba, these shows better be fun or, you'll hang yourself.
Yeah. Over the drive alone. Yeah,
There's nothing worse
Yeah, I had to drive from. I mentioned the Queen's Hotel in Hearst and how I got into that band within a couple of days, and we had to go from Hearst in I think it was January in the middle of a snowstorm, and it was my turn to drive. I'd been with the band for 2 weeks, and we had one headlight going down those roads that take you from Hearst, those mountain roads to Thunder Bay, and I was thinking to myself, I'm going to quit. I'm not doing this again. This is like too much, and I was only 20 years old at the time.
There were times I was on a tour of clubs that was so bad, I was praying to hit a moose.
So after all the touring, you got into radio.
Well,
Now, I first heard you on the radio on Q107 way back when, but you were with another station before that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into radio and the end result?
I answered the phone. That's how I got into radio. I thought it was a joke. I hung up on Warren Cosford 3 times before he called back the 4th time and went, "This is Warren, and I'm not kidding. You want to be a disc jockey?" And that's what happened. And the reason that I got that phone call was Warren had this great idea. He tells the story in one of my blogs. I don't want to bore your listeners with it, but he came up with an idea that this guy, the Iceman, was going to be intercepting the Chum FM frequency at night and coming on the air for 2 hours, doing whatever he wants. And I was going to be the Iceman. And the station would fade out at midnight, and they'd fade me in, and then I'd be in my basement, and, et cetera. And Bob Wood, Robert J., the guy in charge at the time, said, "Well, bring him on board, but I don't want to do that," which is a shame because it would have been a great prank. So I started doing 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., followed by Kelly J. and his circuit. One night he had Tower of Power come down, and they played live over the air and did Kelly's jingle. I mean, it was great Wild West frontier time. But unfortunately, the powers that be there didn't understand the audience at FM radio. So Kelly and I both got let go. But I got fired because of Motorhead. They came in for a 10-minute interview and stayed for my entire 4 hours. And they had stickers on the records, so you couldn't play tracks. And we were taking the stickers off. We were playing race records, a lot of R&B, phones are ringing off the hook. And I got fired the next day for doing amazing radio. And when I got home, I was hired that afternoon by Q107, and it was on the air at midnight that night because they got it. And I did overnights for 6 months, and then I got an afternoon drive. And to this day, I have no idea why. It just happened. And I had a great time, great people. Q107 was a madhouse back then. I have no idea how we kept the station on the air. It was just nuts. And again, a great time, lots of stories. And it was like working with a bunch of characters from a sitcom, me included, I guess. But so that's how I got into radio, and that went to television. I got drafted to Sam Taylor, and I hosted, I think, one of the first video shows on Channel 47, Metro Music it was called. And I did that for a while, and then Sam got drafted by the CBC to do video hits. And John Martin took me I became one of the original producers of the Much Music Television Network.
Wow.
Never forget that. We're having a meeting on the roof of the Bamboo, and I'm looking at John, and I love John. I've known John for a long time. I had to voice the Chum simulcast, Chum Presents. I leaned over the table while he's waving his Labatt Blue around. And I said, "John, what does a television producer do?" And he goes, "You'll find out." I never did. I mean, I still have no idea what I was doing there, but I did it. And then that led to hosting Late Great Movies, which led to, imagine this, I'm 33 years old, and I am responsible for an hour and 20 minutes of live television in a city of millions every week, Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday. I have a $75 a week budget, which translated to Chinese food on Saturday night. And I started out with me and a locked up camera, and then I got an intern who went on to become the editor of all the seasons of Kids in the Hall, Terry Dale. And we got another intern, Paul, so now we've got that. And then I had a guest on one night, Ty Templeton, who was an 18-year-old kid who put out his own comic book called Stig's Inferno. Now Ty is an award-winning comic book writer and artist. He's done everybody from Batman, Superman to Spider-Man, the Avenger, you name it. He's done them, including The Simpsons and Family Guy. And he just came on, and when he was leaving, at what time we get out of there? 5:30 in the morning. He threw a sheaf of papers down on my desk and said, "I wrote some skits I thought maybe you might want to have a look at." And I remember Moses tried to fire him every single night that we were there. Moses would show up and go, "What is he doing on my television station?" I said, "He's part of the show."
I just want to point out that the Moses Bob is referring to here is Moses Znaimer, the media mogul who was responsible for, among other things aside from Much Music, City TV, CP24, Bravo TV, Space TV, Fashion TV, and is currently heading up Zoomer Media. Now back to the show.
He looks at Ty. He says, "If I see your face on my television station one more time, I'm firing the lot of you." And he storms out. So the next night we start the show, and Ty's got a lampshade over his head. And the next break, he's wearing a gas mask. The break after that, he's standing behind a thick palm tree. Moses comes up the stairs about 4 in the morning. He goes, "All right, Ty, come with me in my office." And he hired him, gave him a salary. So we won that one.
That's hilarious. I want to know how you got into doing voice acting. I know you had at least one role, if not two, on the Raccoons animated series.
Yeah, it was Woodchuck Berry.
Yeah.
One of my dearest friends was a woman who was a neighbor at the time named Kim Everett. And Kim had still the biggest casting company in the country called Powerhouse. And she got me into commercial voiceovers. And there was a couple of years there where I was getting everything. I didn't even have to audition anymore. Those were very lucrative years. I'm one of the few people who I got triple scale, which was unheard of, for one commercial that went "The only crispy crunch better than yours is someone else," which ran for 13 years and paid me an idiot amount of money. And when they stopped using it for 2 years, or 3 years, and they started using it again, they had to pay for the 2 or 3 years they didn't use it. It was very lucrative. And I learned more about recording from the directors and producers of those commercials than I ever did in a recording studio from guys that make records. I learned so much more about direction, and a good producer can get better performances out of people if they know how to engage the person that's talking or singing in what their actual job is.
I've experienced that in the recording studio, but it's interesting to know that you could get so much insight from doing voiceover and commercial work.
Well, it's because you had 3 people to please, and your pleasure becomes pleasing them. So instead of asserting your ego to get your way, you learn that everything gets better, elevates, if you serve what you're doing, i.e. the song, or in the case of the spoken word. You know, there are some awards. I did a series of Levi commercials, and I ad-libbed "Because They're Blue," and it won awards. Not for me, but for the producers of the thing. And it's because once I knew what they wanted, then it was easier to contribute what I could after we got what they wanted. And my production chops, I mean, I never liked producing myself, but I always got amazing performances out of musicians. And one thing I'm very proud of, with the exception of a few tracks on the Goodbye LA album, you can hear every word of every song that I ever recorded, that I produced. The music still has punch because I am not a fan. If a song is well written, I want to hear the words. And most rock records, the lyrics are buried.
I had a hard time when I was a kid coming up trying to learn how to cop some of the hits of the day, in particular things like CCR. I never knew what the hell John Fogerty was saying, and the Rolling Stones, the same. I half the time I didn't know what Mick Jagger was saying. So I get the importance of enunciation and clarity, for sure.
But the secret is you want the music to wrap around it. You don't want the music behind it. You want it around it. So you're all part of the landscape, which is why you have to write. I mean, now with automated digital stuff, you can raise the levels of the guitar solos and sync them back into the track. You only have to do it once, and then the automation will remember it. Back then, it was like, I can remember 3 or 4 guys writing faders in a mix, so 6 or 8 hands on the board at once trying to get a good mix because all the stuff had to move. It had to breathe. And I think a lot of musicians and a lot of people that work, especially in the rock genre, unfortunately, I think that a lot of the nuances have been lost because there's no attention to detail. These days, popular music has a soft part and a loud part, or a fast part and a slow part, and a singing part and a rapping part. And there's no dynamics. There's no great rock and roll is about restraint and taste, and most importantly, tension and release. In other words, if you don't build tension, there is no release. There is no climactic moment. There's no surprise. There's no elation. There's no laugh at the end of the joke. And this takes some skill and some patience and people who understand that music, like a human being, it has to breathe. It has to have a life. And a lot of that is lost now because it's all about volume and the Max Martinization of contemporary music. In other words, if you want to get on the radio in major markets, in the major Virgin-style radio stations, you have to sound like the other guy. It has to be the same, or it won't fit the format. And if you ask me, this eliminates 90% of the talent that's making music right now. Because believe me, I could sit here for 24 hours and play you records from the last 5 years and currently that blow your mind. But you're not going to hear them on the radio. Because radio, last time I got fired from Q, I got fired from Q 3 times. Well, no, I quit once because I kind of was forced to, because I had to choose between TV and radio. I had to go where no man has gone before to learn how to be television. The last time I got fired at Q was this guy who I have to have somebody to work with on radio. I can't do it by myself. So I enlisted my operator, Scott Penfold, who still has a great career in radio as we speak, because Scott was clever and smart, could do great voices, had a great laugh. So I treated it like a morning show, which is all radio should be like a morning show. You know why morning shows get the most money and make the most famous jocks? Because it's a team and everything is better. And why radio doesn't go, why don't we do this with every shift? But hey, that's just me.
I do know that the morning show is where the money's at for DJs.
So I put Scott on the air with me, and I'm told not to do that. And I went, why? This is great radio. And to prove the point, the first book comes out. We were doing Saturday and Sundays. We had a 24 share, which was 3 points bigger than the morning show. So I proved my point. So the book comes out. A week later, I get fired. And I said, you saw the book, right? And this idiot, who has since no longer listened to, wasn't disc jockey, he was on the business end of it. And he finally got fired from Chorus. I don't know where he is now, I don't care to know. At any rate, he leans over, and his face is right in my face, and he says, sometimes the numbers don't matter. numbers always matter. This is the same guy that said, a lot of radio people say, radio has never been in the business of music discovery. And that's true. What they fail to understand is that the audience is in the business of music discovery. And the reason that 75% of radio's audience that existed in 1980 has left radio, radio right now has 25% of the audience that it used to have before 1980. And the reason is because people have figured out that the radio is not where they're going to discover the new music. They don't play any of it. They play what fits the format. And some of it, Bruno Mars and what's his name, Mark Ronson. I mean, Uptown Funk is one of the greatest records ever recorded, deserved to be a number one record. And just like Romeo, two guys from Montreal, Old 45s, another great record. So great stuff does eke through sometimes. Owl City, Firefly. Those are great, wonderful, unique records.
When I talked to Al Mayer a while ago, he was telling me that now the breakout platform is TikTok. And that's not for guys like you and me. That's for today's youth. So it's a good thing I'm not trying to get on radio anymore.
I wouldn't last 5 minutes on terrestrial radio. I couldn't do it.
What have you been up to lately, Bob?
About 5'10".
Yeah, but aside from the growth spurt you've experienced in your later years?
Well, I moderate and edit and publish 6 writers 7 days a week when I'm writing. Lately I've had writer's block I'm trying to get rid of. But mostly now dealing with the health issues that come with getting older and taking care of business, really. I watch a lot of movies and television. Thank God for good electronics. There's never enough hours in the day to do everything that they do. I always run out of time.
I hear that, yeah.
I have no desire to perform again. There's a bunch of stuff I want to record.
Well, I know that personally I will be looking forward to hearing any of those possible future recordings, Bob. And until next time, cheers.
All right, well, thank you very much for your time, and it was always a pleasure to talk with you.
When you talk about a guy in the entertainment business who's been there, done that, and has a lot to say about it, it's hard to top Bob Segarini, that's for sure. Now, here is All the Young Dudes, featuring Bob, along with Wayne Cullen, Bill Cooch Trocham, David and Richie Henman, and Brian Greenway. From All the Young Dudes, all the old demos, right down to it. Enjoy. Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a one-man production, meaning that I've done all the work, including guest acquisition, recording, editing, and so on. And hey, if you like the show, why not subscribe and help support us through Patreon at patreon.com/TommySolo. The theme song for Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a clip from my original composition, The Burn. All rights reserved. And you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for listening, and until next time, cheers.